KFSR at CMAC present the Central Valley Ledger, a public affairs program featuring stories from all over the Central Valley with Sevag Tateosian, 90.7 KFSR.
Welcome to another edition of the Central Valley Ledger. We're recording out of the downtown Fresno studios of the Community Media Access Collaborative, Fresno and Clovis. Today's guest is not too far from where we're sitting. His office is in downtown, and he's been in downtown for a while. Mr. Dirk Poeschel, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So you have a land services type of company. How do you describe your company? Because you do a little bit of a lot.
We do. The company specializes in assisting property owners, developers in working through the land use entitlement process.
So you have a beautiful building.
Thank you.
On Van Ness.
Thank you.
It's kind of tucked away in between two buildings, but whoever passes by can't miss it because you've done a good job maintaining it. Tell us about your building.
Well, the lot used to be Judge LaRue's office, and the city condemned it some 40 years ago. And the lot sat there for many, many years, and I'd walk by it and say, man, this is an ugly little lot. And then I'd walk by it another day, and I'd say, this is a cute little lot. So I decided that I would buy it and build my office on the lot. And we're just very happy to be downtown. As I mentioned, our goal was to have it look as though the building had been there for many, many years. So we took great care in trying to get the scale and color and the whole aura of the building to look as though it had been part of the downtown community for many, many years. I think we succeeded.
You have, in a lot of people's opinion, because it looks nice. And so it's pretty cool because around you, things are starting to look a little nicer too. You got the DA's building that's been beautifully refurbished.
Yeah, that's just a great attribute to downtown. I think they've done a really wonderful job. It's very authentic. It's just a really, really wonderful attribute to the community.
So before we go on and get a little further out, let's talk a little bit about you. So you went to Fresno State?
No, I'm a Cal Poly grad.
Okay, Cal Poly,
San Luis Obispo. And I wrote my senior thesis on a landmark zoning case.
Interesting.
That had to do with the Padre Hotel in Bakersfield.
Okay.
The property owner wrote the city of Bakersfield before he purchased the hotel, asking if the building was fit to occupy. City of Bakersfield Fire Department replied, yes, it is. He bought it. And the city of Bakersfield then, within a few weeks, adopted the Uniform Building Code, rendering the building unfit to occupy.
Oh, no.
So he took the case through Kern Superior Court, the California Supreme Court, and then the United States Supreme Court. About 50 other cities filed briefs with friends of the city of Bakersfield. But during that period, there was a real acrimonious dispute with the property owner and the city. And ultimately, over many years, the hotel became really a wonderful landmark. It's been rehabilitated. It's just a wonderful gem for downtown Bakersfield.
I was thinking Fresno State, and I know why now. It's because you helped with the Save Mart Center somehow. Talk about that.
Yes. Well, as you can appreciate, a project like that is very complicated. Mm-hmm. And there's multiple disciplines that need to come together as a team so that the project is a success. And so one of the things that I was able to do was to understand the environmental potential consequences of the project, who the university may hire to provide various studies and kind of shepherd that through. And it got done and everybody's happy. I think we got a great community asset.
So I was thinking about this the other day and I'm like, what am I going to ask Mr. Poeschel when I've got him here on the set? So someone buys a lot mm-hmm. and says, I'm going to put a house on it. Easy, right? Or?
Not necessarily. And I say not necessarily because each city and county adopt their own zoning ordinance. Okay. And that zoning ordinance has standards for each zone district. In other words, setbacks, front yard, rear yard, how much of a house can you put on, lot coverage, how high can the house be? And in some cases, some cities have design guidelines about what the houses should look like. So one would assume that building your home on your own lot would be easy, but it's not necessarily so.
What do you have to say regarding what's involved in actually developing or building on a lot? Because some people, like I said, they think, okay, I'm going to buy and I'm going to put a house there. But before someone buys a lot, they should really do their research, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of components that a prudent buyer or builder would go through. You'd want to make sure that the soils were appropriately compacted, that there was no hazardous materials, that the house or structure that you're interested in building on the lot can fit. In other words, it meets the development standards of the municipality. That the architectural design is compatible with the neighborhood.
And I'm going to interrupt you, and I apologize if I interrupt you in the interview, but what I think of is like the Tower District Design Review Committee, where they look at certain designs. So is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's a really good example, because in that instance, the community has come together and said, we have a special area, we want to protect that theme, that aura, and we want to work cooperatively with the people who are going to make improvements in our community so that they're compatible.
You worked for the city. Talk about how that came about and why you transitioned.
Well, it was really a great opportunity. I worked for 2 city managers as a paid intern when I was coming out of college, Mr. Hanley and Jim Aldrich. Both of them really cared about our city, very professional, and I learned a lot from particularly Mr. Aldrich because I spent more time with him. But it really taught me about city and regional government. You learn certain things when you're in school, and then there's the reality of how it really works when you're working at an agency. So it was a great opportunity. I used that opportunity to then go to the Fresno County Planning Department. I was there for 4 years. And that was a whole different kind of look, because it's more of an agrarian focus. The issues are different. It's more roads and agriculture protection, Williamson Act, those kind of things. But it's all about government, and it's all about our valley. So they're very, very similar. City development, and then more of the rural county, like Madera County, Kern County. They all kind of share those characteristics.
So how do you keep up to speed with the regulations? I mean, I imagine that you're following board meetings and agendas and stuff like that, or correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I do. I also try to keep abreast of my industry, planning magazines, Urban Land, Builder Magazine, and try to observe when I travel how other communities are building, how other developers are doing things. And oftentimes you can see things that you can take back to Fresno and say, man, this is a neat idea. We could use this here. Or there's 4 or 5 other ideas that aren't going to work in Fresno for a lot of reasons. And I think that's the art part of this industry. The successful builders, developers, they travel, they learn, and they take the pieces that are applicable to Fresno or Clovis, our valley, and say we can bring these back, make a special component of our project, but leave the pieces that don't apply somewhere else.
So why would someone need you? I'm playing devil's advocate. So I'm stubborn and I say, you know what? I don't need Mr. Poeschel's services. I can put a commercial building on my property and I'll do it just fine.
Well, people are free to do that, but I think what my firm provides is something of a tour guide. It's a very complicated process to develop land or to build structures in California. There are air quality issues. There are traffic issues. There's just a whole list of things that the average person wouldn't know about. And they are very specialized. So someone like me that understands the process, understands the regulations, can typically get you through the process faster than if you were to do it yourself.
If I did it and I messed up, what could happen to me?
Well, it depends on how bad you put the car in the ditch. If you just pop the front wheel, it probably is fixable. But as you can appreciate, we like to be involved in the projects at the beginning, because then we can kind of say, these are the things you need to look out for. These are the things you need to avoid, or these are the things you really need to make sure you do. So going back to your question, there's just a range of bad things that can happen. And it's not that the government set up that they want the bad things to happen. It's just that it's really up to you to protect yourself and develop the property in such a way that it's going to work, and nobody's going to do that better than you.
One of the projects you were involved in is a project that I really like, Quail
Lake.
Beautiful homes, beautiful area.
Great project.
Strong schools. So talk about that project a little bit.
That's a really good example. That property was designated for rural residential development. So that means in the county general plan that the lots would be 2.5 acres. So my client consolidated all these properties and said the rural residential lot development is not really good because you have individual wells, unregulated. We put the sewage effluent into the groundwater. What if we developed a community water system that we could meter? And what if we developed a tertiary water treatment facility, sewage treatment facility? And to do that, we wanted to also have an amenity so people would feel this is kind of an agrarian urban lifestyle, kind of a blend. So the developer hired Harlan Glenn, who's a nationally recognized lake specialist. He did the lakes at Mirage, Treasure Island, Disneyland.
Oh, wow. So you're talking
World class.
Yeah, yeah.
So that 57-acre lake that you see out there has almost a half-a-mile view. Our clubhouse won a national award for the best clubhouse in the country. And I just think some many years later, it just still lives really, really good. It's got a great feel. And it's environmentally superior to what would have occurred out there if we had just built 2.5-acre parcels, because we are using the tertiary water for our landscaping.
How long does a typical project like that last from the day the developer or the owner says, okay, I want to build houses on here, till the day that actually the first house comes up? Because it can take a while.
Yes, a master plan community like that could easily take 2 to 3 years to get through the process, to get up and running, to develop the infrastructure. There's just so much other regulatory considerations besides the county or the city, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, the Air District. In this particular case, we moved the largest planting of pseudobahia that had ever occurred in California, and we were written up in Fish and Game magazine because they were very happy that it actually had occurred in a successful way. So we created a preserve over on the southwest corner of the property that's where the pseudobahia thrives. So it was, but that took time. That took a lot of time of negotiating with Fish and Game and Fish and Wildlife, and those things don't just happen overnight.
And it sounds like it's an added expense for the developer, or whoever moved it, but it sounds like they preserved a very genuine, nice thing.
Yes, and I think most developers want to do that. They want to take the natural components of the project. For example, what Mr. Wilson did at the Dominion, keeping the topography, which creates a natural, very unique topography in our valley. Rather than just bulldozing it and say, well, I want to make all the lots flat, Mr. Wilson had the foresight to understand this topography is something that the market is going to see as a benefit. They're going to be willing to pay more for.
And today, those properties around there are expensive.
They're beautiful. It's beautiful 30 years later.
Quail Lake, when I'm in the area, I drive by, there's walking areas and stuff like that. So do you foresee more master communities like that popping up where there is the walking area and a clubhouse and a pool house and stuff like that?
The master plan community is probably the best vehicle to deliver this amenity package that you're talking about. Open space lands, trails, these other kinds of design guidelines that are somewhat restrictive, but to the common good, to ultimately maintain and increase property values. They're very difficult to develop because it requires the acquisition or accumulation of a lot of property. So, for example, Quail Lake is an example, about 350 acres. Copper River Ranch was about 915 acres, where Mr. Tatham took land and consolidated it literally into one holding and then master planned the entire site. That's very difficult, but the end result is a really special community.
As you're mentioning that, a thought popped in my head that I always think about. So when there's development around, and let's say a developer is building these beautiful homes, you got property owners that see that, and all of a sudden the price jumps. Is there ever a challenge in negotiating? Because, you know, a lot of people will tell me, my friends who have property, is I'm waiting for those developers because they're going to pay me top dollar. Talk about the negotiation aspect a little bit, because I always find it fascinating that, you know, at the end, you know, the developer is able to buy it, but I'm sure there's a lot of back and forth that go on.
There is a lot of back and forth, and the negotiation process, as you can appreciate, if you go door to door to say we want to buy your house, it's not a secret in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so that becomes this assemblage, as we call it in the industry, becomes one of the premier problems of creating even 100 acres or 150 acres. And with the cost of developing these master plan communities, you're really looking at an energy level of 300, 350, 400 acres to make it worthwhile. So you can appreciate if you have 40 property owners or 50 property owners or 60 property owners, the difficulty and cost. Because again, if your uncle got X amount of bucks, you don't want to get $1 less than your uncle.
Of course,
you
I'm
don't
going to get more because now
right.
mine's more valuable.
You don't want to be at Thanksgiving and go, you know, you should have stayed. I got another $10, and that's exactly how it happens.
Is there ever, you know, you hear of these stories of the owner that doesn't want to sell and they're just not selling at all. Do you encounter that? And what, I mean, for me, if a developer comes knocking and says, I want to buy your property and I'm giving you a little over market value, I'll be like, oh, I'll think, okay, let's do business. But there's that one or two property owners that may not want to sell. What do you do then?
Well, that's part of the negotiations.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes these opportunities come by once, and particularly quality projects. So the property owner is faced with perhaps land that has a special meaning to them. There's a familial connection to the land. They farm the land, or maybe they just feel, hey, I heard so-and-so down the road got a lot more and I don't want to sell it for less. So there's a lot of components, a lot of variables that get in the way of some of these deals. But at the end of the day, they have to say, it's a good deal for me, it makes sense. And more we're finding that the property owners want to have a say in what the project looks like.
Oh, interesting.
The Harlan family, for example, we were involved in Harlan Ranch, the planned community.
Boy, can I interrupt you? You're involved in some of my favorite projects.
Well,
anyway.
Thank you very much. But the Harlan family, after selecting the development team, wanted to make sure that that development team had sensitivity to what the Harlan Ranch property meant to them. So there were certain things that they wanted to see and not see. They had a list of things we don't want to have happen out there. So that's also something that developers deal with.
So let's talk a little bit about your experience working for the county. Same kind of thing, right? I mean, you worked for the county for a few years.
I did. I worked for the county for 4 years in the planning department, processing plan amendments, rezoning, subdivisions. And again, it was a great experience. I think all of these things that we have, as we become older, we look back and go, well, I learned a lot. And one of the things that I learned from Mr. Aldrich, he said, you know, Dirk, you can learn by watching somebody do something wrong, just like you can watch them do it right. And so all these opportunities are learning experiences, learning opportunities. And I learned a lot there.
You could have been very successful working for the government or municipality, but you chose to go private sector. Your first client you got in the private sector, what was going through your mind?
Well, you know, when you open your own business, you're scared. And I think probably that you remain scared every day when you're in business. But that's a good thing, because fear is a real good motivator. It's an excellent motivator. You need to be competitive, you need to be thinking, you need to be prepared to deal with the client's issues. So when I worked at my very first client, I was very thankful, and I wanted to work really hard. I wanted to make sure that they felt very comfortable with the work that we were doing. And I wanted to make sure that it was successful for them. And I've tried to keep those kind of values many years later.
Tough question. I'm going to put you on the spot.
That's okay.
Your favorite project, this is going to be tough. I'm putting you in the spot. Because if someone were to ask me who my favorite child is, I would tell you all three of them, and that's true. Your favorite project that you've worked on, do you have one, or can you explain components about some that you like?
Well, I would like to split out the projects that are large and are publicly known.
Okay.
Because those are, when you drive by them, you go, that's pretty, that's beautiful. And the market has responded and said, boy, that's a beautiful project. We want to be there. We want to pay premiums to be there. But I can tell you honestly, I have a couple projects that I worked on. One was one in Clovis where a little girl was promised a swimming pool if she got straight A's. But the parents didn't know that their side yard was really their front yard. And they needed to get a variance to build the pool for this little girl. And so I went over one day, I remember Sunday, I went over to get the check for the variance to submit it to the city of Clovis, and the little girl came up to her mom and dad, says, who's this man? She goes, this is the guy that's gonna get your swimming pool for you. So
pressure's on.
Pressure's on. And of course, these people were wonderful people. They walked the neighborhood. Everybody was happy to help them get this swimming pool. But it gives you a special feeling when you have this connection to a family that something really good is happening at the personal level. I also helped someone years ago where the county zoning ordinance did not allow the sequence of sale of the ranch and the house. And she needed this money for her dad for cancer treatment.
Oh.
And I told her before we started the county staff wasn't going to support this variance. That's not how it works. So it was on my birthday, and I walked in the office, and I told her, it's going to be tough. She's read that. She's really crying. She's really having a tough time with it, and that's tough. And I told her, I said, look, I want to remind you, the Planning Commission is made up of really good people. They're people just like you and me, and they're going to try to do the right thing. And it was really, really a great day because two people took time off of work and said, boy, if you ever give a variance to anybody who deserves it, it's this lady right here. And she got the variance approved and just stood there at the podium and thanked him and cried. And that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
And you're right, because the average person's never going to know that story. We're never going to see that pool hidden in the back or side yard.
And I'll never forget it.
And you'll never forget it.
I'll never forget it.
I drive up the 41 to Madera, and I'm seeing some development up there. Are you ever surprised that the direction of development or anything like that?
No, not really, because there's kind of a history of how development has occurred in the valley. We have a street just not far from here called Parallel because it was parallel to the railroad. And then when the electric trolley car developed, the streets turned north and south. So the project Riverstone and other projects like that are the natural progression of growth north. Copper River's developed, the Groupie Lakes project is developed, and Riverstone is a master plan community that's being well received. Yeah. It's really north Fresno, the metropolitan area. So it's a natural progression.
I think about Madera all the time. Are these communities, and this may be another tough question, but how do you prepare? Like if you're in Madera or a Madera council member or someone in Madera's development department, how do you prepare for the growth that's about to happen? Because, you're right. You go up to Riverstone and there's tons of houses there, and so that's great, but the growth comes with it. So how do you prepare for something like that?
Well, in the Riverstone case, that property again was a master plan community. So the developer had the resources to develop the water, the sewer, the storm drainage, a wonderful landscaping plan, architectural guidelines to really create a community. And I know that they worked closely with the county of Madera to make sure that it was a success. There are some local regulations that require cities to have what they call municipal service reviews so that they're sure to have sewer, water, storm drain, police, fire, those kind of things. But the real work comes with the developer working closely with the municipality. That's how there's a successful project.
So we're running out of time this week on the project, and off air we were talking about downtown. What are your thoughts about downtown? Is this going to be a place where eventually, we're seeing it a little more and more as in the morning people are jogging down Fulton, they're walking their dog, people are living here, you see people at night walking around. Is this going to be an area where people are going to come to and live in?
I think so. It takes time. I know a lot of time has gone by, but I think it's going to be, it's going to incrementally improve every year. And I think that the other generations, X and Y and Z, and that there is a proclivity to want to live downtown because I believe it's more international, it's more cosmopolitan. And I think that we'll get this energy. We'll get a grocery store here, more apartments, livability. I hope that it happens.
Last question, well, two more questions, but looking back, are you glad you put your office in downtown?
Oh yes, I'm really happy about that decision. It was a big decision because at the same time we were working on the Calcott Palm Bluffs project. And there were lots available there, but I just thought that downtown was the place I should be. It was great for my business. I think it was a good thing to walk to the county or walk to the city or walk to Caltrans, and it gave me an opportunity to say I can do this. I can take this little infill site, which was a tough site to develop, and make a little gem.
Sir, how can people find out more information about you?
I have a website. They're welcome to look and see about the services that we provide, and they're obviously welcome to call me, 559-445-0374. Happy to talk to anyone who has development issues and concerns.
Well, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
That's all for this edition of the Central Valley Ledger. You are listening to the program on KFSR 90.7 FM, or watching us on the CMAC channels, Comcast 93 and AT&T 99. Thank you to you for tuning in, and thank you to the volunteer crew that made this production and every production possible. Our technical director is Paul Starcevich. Thank you to our guest, Dirk Poeschel.
Thank you.
Land Services Company, and he's worked on several big, beautiful properties.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
We hope you enjoyed the program this week. Tune in next week to a new edition.
KFSR and CMAC present the Central Valley Ledger every Sunday morning at 11:30. For complete program schedule, visit kfsr.org.